Bifocal Chapter 5 J. I doubled over, partially to catch my breath and partly to reduce the stitch in my side. Please, not another wind sprint, not another punishment run. The coaches kept yelling at us to stop talking and focus. We were focused, just not on football. I never liked football practice, and this one was particularly brutal. But this morning I didn't mind. It was as brutal as usual, but it was also familiar, normal. The sun was bright with a few clouds in the sky and a gentle breeze. It seemed as if we owned the place, especially for the first hour when the school was practically deserted. Maybe you could find a teacher or two, the principal, and some kids at band practice, but practically nobody. And then, like a dam busting, the parking lot was filled with cars and trucks and motorcycles. Music blared, engines roared, and horns went off as people jockeyed for parking spots, dropping off kids, or just tried to attract attention. Maybe they just needed to hear themselves. I honk, therefore I am. As usual, some groups of students wandered over to sit on the bleachers or stand along the sidelines. We had an audience, and despite how tired we were from the first hour of practice, we all dug in a little deeper, ran a little faster, and hit a little harder. I play football, therefore I am. I surveyed the whole scene. Despite the chaos, it all seemed calm. Everything was happening the way it was supposed to happen. There were no police cars ringing the school, no news trucks beaming up satellite feeds, no bomb-sniffing guard dogs or robots looking for explosives, or students in handcuffs. I still couldn't believe that it had been real. It was as if I'd watched a TV drama the day before, not real news about our school, about our community. "Everybody bring it in!" our head coach, Mr. Pruitt, yelled, his voice cracking over the last two words. We all trotted over and gathered around him and the other coaches. Some of the players slumped to the ground, and others stood, forming a big circle. I always stood, along with Kevin and the assistant captains. I wanted to take off my helmet, to cool down, but Kevin kept his helmet on, and so I did too. Nobody spoke. All eyes were on Coach. We all knew that if even one person talked or wasn't paying attention, that we'd all have to do a lap of the track. That was the price of building team unity. "I'd like to tell all of you what happened here at the school yesterday," he said. Now nobody needed to fake paying attention. "But unfortunately," Mr. Pruitt continued, "I don't know. Nobody knows. All the information we have is the same thing you heard on the news or read in the papers this morning." It had been a front page of the paper this morning, the entire front page, big bold headlines over top of a picture of a group of men, their heads covered, in cuffs, being led away. There was even a little article in the bottom corner with the heading, "High School Terrorist." It mentioned our school by name, as well as the locations of the other arrests. Usually we only got mentioned after a football game, and that was on the last page of the sports section under high school sports listing. That's where I usually started reading. Not the high school sports listing, but the sports section. This morning I'd run out and got the paper off the porch and was so busy reading the first section I hadn't even gotten to sports or comics. "Who read the paper this morning?" Coach asked. Most hands went up. "So you know as much about what happened at the school as I do. A kid, I don't even know who he is except by name. I never coached the boy or taught him history. Has been charged with being part of a group that was going to bomb some buildings or such. That's all I know." A hand shot up and Coach motioned for him to speak. "Will they tell us more today in school? You know, make some sort of announcement." Coach shook his head. "I don't think administration knows much. Even if the school did know, they couldn't tell anybody. Privacy issues, especially when it involves minors. We're running out of time, so I do want to talk to you about something pretty important." He paused and his face got all serious. I tried to figure out what it could be. "All you boys who read the paper this morning, can any one of you tell me what place our team ranked?" That's right. It was Tuesday, the day the rankings came out listing every football team. I'd forgotten to even look. A few hands went up, including Kevin's. He was standing right beside me. "Kevin," Coach said, "we're ranked 5th. 5th. I couldn't believe it. We had been 3rd the week before, but then we went on to win the next game. We dropped 2 positions," Coach said, "and the reason for it is simple. We didn't play well in our last game. We may have won, but we didn't win convincingly." Kevin poked me in the side. When I turned, he mouthed, "I told you." "We didn't win our game by enough points, or with enough intensity." The people who made up the rankings decided we lacked something very important. We lacked the thing that separates winners from the almost winners. We lacked killer instinct. We had the team down and beaten, and do you know what we did? He asked. I knew he wasn't looking for an answer. We let them up off the ground. We let them score a touchdown on us, and we didn't score the last quarter. We didn't finish them off. Do you know what that is out there? He said, pointing to the field. That, he said, is a war zone. When we go out there, we aren't just playing a game. We are going into battle. We are going into war. And in a war, there is no place for prisoners. Of course I knew there were prisoners of war, but I also knew I'd have to be crazy to say anything. We all know we have a game on Thursday, he continued. It's not enough to simply beat the other team. It's not enough for us to win. We have to blow them off the field. We have to kill them. Somehow after yesterday, the words kill and blow them off the field sounded a bit strange. His voice cracked over the last words. When he got worked up, his voice got higher and higher until he sounded like he had been sucking helium. He sounded a bit like Minnie Mouse, but nobody dared to smile. A voice shared with Minnie Mouse did not make for a good inspirational football speech. I knew we'd win our game on Thursday. We were a much better team, but of course Coach Pruitt was right. It wasn't enough for us just to win. We were expected to win. We had to win by a lot. And just like it wasn't enough for us to just win, it wasn't enough for us to be listed at number 3 in the rankings. Our school had a tradition of being the best at football. For other schools, it was basketball or baseball or their science programs or having the top students or for their musical or drama programs. For us, it was football. This might be the only school where being ranked second and losing in the finals would be considered a complete failure. We knew that. All the students and parents knew that. Mr. Pruitt knew that too. And especially because this was his first year as head coach, he couldn't afford not to win at all. Okay, 1 lap of the track, then everybody change and get ready for class, Mr. Pruitt said. I'll see you men right here after school. Expect that practice will not be a picnic. Slowly the people got to their feet and started moving. Kevin moved to the front of the pack, and I stayed at his side. Come on, pick it up, Kevin yelled over his shoulder. Move it, move it, move it! The whole line behind us jumped forward, picking up the pace. As we rounded the first corner, I looked back at the lines of players snaking along behind us. 42 players, all in full pads and equipment, jogging along in a line. It felt like we were leading an army, and, I guess in a way, we were. We finished the lap. The last stragglers, mostly the linemen, were still half a lap back. Kevin started walking back, yelling at them to hustle or they'd get another lap. I kept walking. Being first into the dressing room meant getting a shower right away and not having to wait in line. I unbuckled my helmet and pulled it off. I could feel the rush of cool air. We came in through the back doors and our cleats clicked against the floor. It sounded ominous and powerful, and with each extra player coming, the sound got louder. Students in the hall moved out of our way. I didn't blame them. We were like an army, and we were big guys, even bigger in our pads, helmets, and cleats. I could tell we had finished up later than usual this morning because the number of people in the hall. I hoped there was time for a shower. I hated going to class all sweaty and smelly. I led the procession around the corner, and it suddenly struck me. This was the corridor where the bomb disposal robot had been rolling along, where the locker had been searched. I wonder which locker belonged to the guy who'd been arrested. Almost instantly I had my answer. 4 little orange pylons on the floor stood around a locker with the door gone, replaced by yellow police tape. All that remained of the door were twisted hinges. I pictured that police robot extending its big claw arm and just ripping the door off. I slowed down and was bumped by the guy behind me. He was looking at the locker as well, instead of where he was walking. I stepped aside. I wanted to look longer. The line of players kept moving, and I looked at the locker through them as they passed. The locker was completely empty. Whatever had been in there was gone. There was a dusting of thin white powder on the bottom of the locker. For a split second I had the bizarre thought that it was explosives or some sort of chemical, anthrax or the plague, but that was just crazy. More likely it was something the police sprayed to detect explosives, or to take fingerprints, or— "Excuse me." "What?" "Excuse me," a girl said. She was brown and little. She must have been in grade 9. "Could I get into my locker, please?" "Oh, sure," I muttered. I stepped out of the way and bumped into another girl. "I'm sorry," she muttered, even though I was the one who had bumped into her. No, I'm sorry, it was my fault. I apologized as I shifted again. She was even smaller than the first, and she wore a pink scarf and that funny sort of dress they wear sometimes. Suddenly I felt very big and clumsy and out of place in my football equipment. Pretty weird, huh? I said, trying to be friendly. She looked slightly up at me, hardly making eye contact, nodded her head a bit, and then looked away. It was almost like she was afraid of me. It's hard to believe that could happen here, I said, gesturing at the locker and police tape. Impossible to believe, a voice said from behind. I turned around. It was Xana, a girl I knew from my geography class. She had volunteered to be my partner last year for a project when I didn't know anybody else in the class. She was smart and friendly and had a great sense of humor. Right now, she didn't look that friendly. "Hi, how are you doing?" I asked. "Not so great." "No way would Azim be involved in anything like that," she said. I shrugged. "I don't really know him." "Well, I do. It's just not possible." "Police must have had some reason." "We'll see about that. We'll just have to wait until the truth comes out," she said. The last few players were still moving down the hall. Kevin was at the end, talking to a couple of linemen who were moving along slowly. "Come on, Jay. Get shaken or you'll be late for class," Kevin said as he walked by. "Yeah, sure." I started to walk away. "Ask Mustafa about Azim," Xana said. I stopped and turned. "Mustafa?" "Mustafa," she said, pointing to one of the linemen who had just passed by. "Oh," I said, nodding in my head. "Moose. His name is Mustafa." Moose was one of the two brown guys on the team. He was in grade 12, and I only knew him from the team. He was big and not very fast, and his feet sort of pointed east and west when he was running north or south. He seemed like a pretty cool guy, though. He usually had an iPod in his pocket, at least one of the earphones in. He was always downloading new hip-hop songs that he wanted people to hear. "Mustafa knows him," Xana said. "You ask him if Azim could be a terrorist." "Sure, thanks. I'll do that." I trotted away. Time was tight. By the time I got to the locker room, there was already a line waiting for the showers. There probably wouldn't be enough time for me to have one. I'd just splash a whole lot of body wash and hope one smell overpowered the other. The locker room was loud and hot and smelly. If it all weren't so familiar, it would have been disgusting. I could hear the showers going, and some of the guys were already finished, walking back wearing only towels. I sat down on the bench and started to peel off my uniform and equipment. Everything was sticky and wet with sweat. It smelled now. It would be a lot worse after spending the day in my gym bag in the locker. Moose was sitting on a bench across from me. "Moose!" I called out. His iPod was on, both ears plugged in. He didn't hear me. "Moose!" I yelled and waved. He looked up, pulled out one of the plugs. "Yeah?" "That guy Azim, the one arrested. Do you know him?" "Sure." "And what do you think?" "About what?" he asked. "Do you think he could be guilty?" He shrugged. "How would I know?" "I just thought, because he's a Muslim and I'm a Muslim, I'd know." "No," I said, shaking my head, although that was at least part of it. "That girl I was talking to." He looked confused. "The one I was talking to in the hall just now." "Ah, yes. That's Xana. Very pretty." "Yeah, I guess. She said you knew him." "I do. I just don't know him that well. I'm here at football practices, and he's part of the prayer group." "What prayer group?" "Some Muslim kids. They meet in one of the shop classes, and they study the Koran and say prayers. Lots of kids are part of that group. I go there myself sometimes." That surprised me, although I didn't know why it should. "Muslims are supposed to gather and say prayers 5 times a day," Moose explained. "One of those times is right around noon." "And you go there to pray?" I wasn't sure if that was a question or a statement. "Sure, sometimes. Most of the time I just go to McDonald's." "You say prayers at McDonald's?" Moose laughed. "The only thing I pray for there is that the lineup won't be too long during lunchtime." This time I laughed too. I didn't really know Mustafa, as anything more than a lineman. Heck, other than knowing that he liked hip-hop, I didn't know anything about him. I hadn't even known his real name until 5 minutes ago. What he did when he wasn't downloading music or playing football was a mystery to me. He could be going to study the Koran, working in the library, or helping the homeless, or making bombs. Moose plugged in the second earphone and continued to change out of his football stuff. I'd hoped there'd be more in the announcements, but all there was after the national anthem was the usual assortment of things about school clubs, drama night, the football game on Thursday, and somebody who had left on the headlights of their blue Ford Focus. Nothing about what had gone on yesterday. Not a thing. Yesterday was nothing more than a mass hallucination. The only evidence here at the school to the contrary was the locker and an empty seat in some grade 12 class somewhere in the school. I wondered where that Azim guy was right now. Was he in court? In jail? How would he ever survive in jail? Not that I'd ever been, but I'd watched enough episodes of Law and Order and Oz to know that it wasn't the best place in the world to be if you were weak and unable to defend yourself. Suddenly the fire alarm started to ring. Some people groaned. Some seemed happy. It was an excuse to get out of class, to see some friends, maybe wander over to the creek and have a smoke. We started to pack our bags. We weren't supposed to. We were supposed to just leave, but we all knew that it was just another false alarm, and we didn't want to have to come back to get our things. Somebody pulled the alarm at least once every couple of weeks. "Okay, everybody, please file out through the appropriate door," Miss Henderson said. She didn't sound any more worried or excited than any of the rest of us. Maybe she was looking forward to standing outside and talking to the other teachers. "Please exit through stairway B," she said. Somebody opened the door and the ringing got louder. There was a bell just outside our home room. "Smoke!" somebody yelled out. Instantly the other sounds stopped and all eyes turned to the door. There was a thin layer of smoke wafting through the air. "Everyone out immediately!" Miss Henderson yelled. Suddenly she wasn't so calm. A few people hesitated, still packing their bags, but most people rushed for the door, creating a momentary traffic jam. I popped through and into the hall. There was smoke coming up the stairwell and filling the hall. It was thick and black. This was real. Teachers lined the hall, hurrying people along. One girl tried to get into her locker, but she was hustled away. She started arguing about her new jacket being in there. Apparently, her jacket was more important than her life. Must be some jacket, or maybe not much of a life. I followed the flow along the hall, into the far stairwell, and down the first floor. I'd been in at least a dozen fire drills, but this was different. Everyone was moving faster. Nobody was talking or joking around much. In fact, some of the kids and teachers seemed genuinely worried. We exited the school and spilled out into the side parking lot. The crowd started to fan out and slow down, but the teachers kept everyone moving away from the school and onto the football field. There was already a crowd gathering in the center of the field as streams of students flowed from different doors. I turned around and looked back at the school. I didn't see anything, certainly no fire. I looked around for Kevin. For a split second I had the bizarre idea that he was up on the roof, watching. That was crazy. Not even Kevin would do that. At that instant the fire truck appeared. It had its lights on, but it didn't seem to be moving very quickly. They probably thought it was just another false alarm. Firemen must hate false alarms. They must hate high schools. This time, though, it was for real. Somebody had set a fire, or set off a bomb. Now that was even crazier thinking than wondering if Kevin was on the roof watching. No way had there been a bomb. I would have heard it, wouldn't I? But what if Azim hadn't kept the bomb in his locker, but in somebody else's locker, or somewhere else around the school? And whoever was in on it with him decided that the best way to free Azim was to set off the bomb while he was in custody. Or maybe it went off by accident, or someone set it off because he was angry that his friend had been arrested, or— I stopped myself. What was I thinking? Probably somebody had dropped a cigarette butt into the garbage can. The fire truck came to a stop with the piercing, squealing sound of its brakes. 3 police cars pulled up behind. Casually, the firemen got off the truck. 2 of them, wearing thick coats, big black boots, and helmets, walked towards the side exit. One of them pulled open a door. Black smoke came billowing out and into the sky. 2 firefighters pulled en masse. On their backs were air tanks. They ducked down low and stepped through the door and into the building. "Wow," I muttered to myself. Firemen amaze me. How brave would you have to be to walk into a burning building? Another fireman used an axe to wedge open the door. It took a while before the first 2 firefighters reappeared. One of them held a small container. Smoke was billowing out of it. Instantly I knew what it was. A smoke bomb. Somebody had set off a smoke bomb in the stairwell. The fireman dropped it onto the ground, and another fireman aimed the nozzle of a fire extinguisher at it. A line of white foam shot out, beating down on the smoke, covering it, smothering it, entombing the fire in a pile of white foam. A final puff of smoke drifted up into the sky, and the smoke bomb was no more. "Somebody set off a smoke bomb," I said, more to myself than to the people around me. "At least it got us out of French," somebody beside me said. Getting out of French did sound pretty good. It just better not mean that there was no football practice tonight. If it did get canceled, I wasn't going to drive home with Kevin. It would be a lot safer to walk home.